The questions Buddha refused to answer and what it means for us today. Have you ever wondered why some of life's biggest questions, like the origins of the universe or the existence of the soul, remain unanswered? Over 2,500 years ago, the Buddha faced these very questions but chose silence. Why? What deeper truth did he uncover instead? In this video, we'll explore the 14 questions Buddha left unanswered, his profound reasons behind this silence, and the extraordinary wisdom he offered instead. A path that transcends speculation and leads directly to inner peace and liberation. Stay tuned for an inspiring journey into the timeless teachings of the Buddha. Here are the 14 questions grouped into 4 main categories. Questions about the cosmos, the nature of the universe. Is the universe eternal? Is the universe not eternal? Is the universe finite? Is the universe infinite? These questions focus on the nature and extent of the universe. They inquire about whether the universe is eternal or finite, or whether it is boundless or limited. These are metaphysical questions that speculate about the origins and the end of the cosmos. Buddha did not answer these questions because they don't directly impact the path to enlightenment. Speculating about the universe's origins or its size does not lead to practical insights about the cessation of suffering. Instead, Buddha emphasized that the most important thing was to focus on understanding the nature of suffering, its causes, and how to eliminate it. Questions about the self, the nature of the individual. Is the self identical with the body? Is the self different from the body? These questions probe the relationship between the self and the physical body. Are the self and the body the same, or is the self distinct from the body? These questions stem from a deeper inquiry into the nature of individual identity. Buddha's teachings center around the concept of anatta, or non-self, meaning that there is no permanent, unchanging self. The Buddha refused to engage with these questions because they are based on a false view of the self. Instead, he taught that everything, including the self, is impermanent and dependent on conditions. The self is not something fixed, it is an ongoing process, and clinging to a fixed idea of the self leads to suffering. Questions about the Tathagata, Buddha, after death. Does the Tathagata exist after death? Does the Tathagata not exist after death? Does the Tathagata both exist and not exist after death? Does the Tathagata neither exist nor not exist after death? These questions explore the fate of the Buddha, referred to as the Tathagata, after his death. Does the Buddha continue to exist, cease to exist, or is his state after death inconceivable or beyond comprehension? These are questions about the nature of existence after physical death. The Buddha refused to answer these questions because they are irrelevant to the goal of liberation. These speculative questions about the nature of the Buddha's existence after death do not contribute to the understanding of suffering or the path to enlightenment. Buddha's teachings focus on what is practical for ending suffering in this lifetime, not abstract discussions about life after death. Furthermore, the Buddha's death, parinirvana, marks the cessation of suffering, and clinging to ideas about his post-death existence distracts from the more immediate task of personal liberation. Questions about the soul and the body, existence and the soul. Does the soul exist? Does the soul not exist? Does the soul both exist and not exist? Does the soul neither exist nor not exist? These questions delve into the nature of the soul. Do we have an eternal soul that exists beyond the body, or is there no soul at all? What happens to the soul after death? These inquiries deal with metaphysical speculation on the existence or non-existence of the soul. The Buddha rejected these questions because they are based on the mistaken idea of a permanent, unchanging self or soul. In his teaching of anatta, non-self, he clarified that there is no eternal soul or self. The belief in a permanent, separate soul leads to attachment, which is a root cause of suffering. Instead, Buddha emphasized the impermanence of all phenomena, including what we consider to be the self. By focusing on the understanding of the mind and body as interconnected and constantly changing, one can end suffering rather than getting caught in speculative ideas about the soul. Why did Buddha refuse to answer these questions? The Buddha compared these metaphysical speculations to a man shot with a poisoned arrow. Instead of immediately removing the arrow to save his life, the man demands to know who shot the arrow, what kind of wood the bow was made from, and other irrelevant details. By the time these questions are answered, the man would have died. The Buddha explained that such speculative inquiries are distractions. Instead of resolving these questions, one should focus on understanding the Four Noble Truths and following the Eightfold Path, which directly lead to the cessation of suffering. The Buddha's discovery, known as enlightenment or awakening, revealed profound truths about existence and the cessation of suffering. His insights are encapsulated in the following teachings. The Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are the foundational teachings of Buddhism, offering a profound insight into the nature of suffering and the path to its cessation. They guide individuals toward the understanding of suffering, its causes, its cessation, and the way to achieve liberation. Let's explore each of these truths in detail. The truth of suffering, dukkha. The first noble truth acknowledges that suffering is an inherent part of life. However, the concept of suffering in Buddhism is not limited to obvious pain or physical discomfort. It encompasses a wide range of experiences, both external and internal. Buddha taught that suffering arises from various sources: physical suffering, pain, illness, aging, and death; mental suffering, emotional pain, such as sadness, anxiety, grief, and disappointment; existential suffering, the dissatisfaction or sense of incompleteness we feel even during moments of pleasure or happiness, because these experiences are impermanent. Buddha's definition of suffering also includes samsara, the cycle of rebirth, the constant cycle of birth, death, and rebirth that people undergo. This endless cycle is marked by the suffering of impermanence and attachment. Suffering in change. Even experiences of pleasure and happiness are temporary and change, leading to a deeper sense of dissatisfaction. Suffering in conditioned existence. The suffering associated with craving and clinging to things that are fleeting, such as material possessions, relationships, or status. Suffering is universal. It affects all beings regardless of their status or wealth. However, it is also not something permanent. The first noble truth is not about being pessimistic, but about acknowledging the reality of life so that we can confront it with wisdom. The truth of the cause of suffering, samudaya. The second noble truth explains that the root cause of suffering is craving, tanha, or attachment. Craving refers to the desire for pleasure, material things, status, or even experiences and relationships. It arises from ignorance, avidya, about the true nature of reality. Buddha identified three main causes of suffering: craving for sensory pleasures, kama tanha; the desire for things that give us pleasure, such as food, entertainment, or relationships. These desires are transient and ultimately lead to dissatisfaction. Craving for existence, bhavatanha, the desire for existence or becoming something, such as a specific identity or role, which leads to attachment and fear of losing what one has created. Craving for non-existence, vibhavatanha, the desire to escape or destroy something we find unpleasant, such as pain, failure, or emotions we deem negative, leading to aversion and avoidance. These cravings are fueled by ignorance, which causes us to misunderstand the true nature of the world. We become attached to things that are impermanent and therefore cannot provide lasting satisfaction. Suffering is not random. It arises due to our attachment to impermanent things. By understanding the causes of suffering, we gain insight into how it can be removed. The truth of the cessation of suffering, Nirodha. The third noble truth is the realization that it is possible to put an end to suffering. This is the heart of the Buddha's teachings. He didn't just acknowledge suffering, but he also offered a solution. The cessation of suffering comes when we remove the craving and attachment that causes it. This state is known as Nirvana, which is the ultimate goal in Buddhism. Nirvana is the cessation of all desire, attachment, and ignorance. It is characterized by freedom from craving and aversion. One no longer clings to the things of the world, nor do they run away from unpleasant experiences. End of the cycle of rebirth. By breaking free from the cycle of craving and attachment, one is liberated from the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, samsara. True peace and happiness. Nirvana is the realization of true peace and profound happiness that arises from the understanding of the impermanent nature of all things. The Buddha's path shows that, while suffering is a part of life, it is not something we have to accept as inevitable. The cessation of suffering is possible through the elimination of ignorance and craving. Suffering can be ended by eliminating its causes, through understanding, letting go of attachments, and achieving liberation from the cycle of samsara. The truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, Magga. The fourth noble truth outlines the way to end suffering. The Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the fourth of the Four Noble Truths in Buddhism, which provides a practical guide for ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. It is the path leading to the cessation of suffering, dukkha, and the attainment of enlightenment, nirvana. The Eightfold Path is often divided into three key sections: wisdom, prajna, ethical conduct, sila, and mental discipline, samadhi. Right view, samadhi. Right view is about understanding the true nature of reality. It involves seeing things as they truly are and recognizing the Four Noble Truths, which reveal the nature of suffering, its causes, its cessation, and the path leading to its cessation. It also includes understanding the law of karma, the principle that actions have consequences, and recognizing the impermanence of all phenomena. Key insights: the impermanent nature of all things. Everything in life, including our thoughts, emotions, and experiences, is transient. The truth of suffering. All living beings experience suffering or dissatisfaction in various forms. The nature of cause and effect. Our actions, words, and thoughts lead to positive or negative consequences, shaping our future experiences. By cultivating a proper understanding of reality, we can overcome ignorance and begin to develop wisdom that helps us navigate life without unnecessary attachment or aversion. Right intention. Samasankappa. Right intention refers to the mental attitudes and intentions that motivate our actions. It is about having a mindset that aligns with compassion, nonviolence, and renunciation. There are three primary aspects to right intention. Intention of renunciation, letting go of attachment to material things, desires, and worldly pleasures. Intention of goodwill, cultivating kindness and compassion for others, wishing for their happiness and well-being. Intention of harmlessness, avoiding ill will, hatred, and violence, and instead promoting peace and harmony. Key insights. Intention shapes our actions. Our actions arise from our intentions, and by developing positive intentions, we can reduce suffering for ourselves and others. Non-attachment, letting go of the need for worldly possessions and pleasures, helps reduce the desire-driven suffering in life. By fostering pure, loving intentions, we cultivate the emotional and mental states necessary for spiritual growth and ethical living. Right speech, samavaka. Right speech involves speaking truthfully, kindly, and constructively. It encompasses several ethical principles: avoiding lying, speaking truthfully, and avoiding deceit. Avoiding divisive speech, refraining from gossip, slander, or causing discord among people. Avoiding harsh speech, refraining from rude, insulting, or hurtful words. Avoiding idle chatter, refraining from frivolous or meaningless conversations, focusing instead on words that are useful, kind, and necessary. Key insights. Words have power. What we say can either create harmony or cause harm. Right speech encourages us to use our words to uplift others, speak the truth, and avoid causing unnecessary conflict. Ethical communication. Practicing mindfulness in our speech helps us avoid causing suffering to others and ourselves. Right speech helps build trust, mutual respect, and harmony in relationships, fostering peace and reducing suffering. Right action, samakamanta. Right action involves living in a way that is morally and ethically sound, avoiding actions that harm others, and cultivating behaviors that lead to well-being for all beings. This includes refraining from killing, practicing non-violence toward all living beings, refraining from stealing, respecting others' property, and not taking what is not given, refraining from sexual misconduct, acting responsibly in relationships, avoiding harm through lustful or unethical behavior. Key insights. Actions matter. Our actions directly impact our well-being and the well-being of others. Ethical behavior helps create a peaceful and harmonious life. Living harmoniously with others. By acting with integrity and compassion, we foster good relationships and contribute positively to the world. Right action reduces harm, fosters mutual respect, and promotes a life that aligns with ethical principles. Right livelihood, sama ajiva. Right livelihood refers to earning a living in a way that does not harm others or contribute to suffering. This involves choosing a profession that is ethical and aligned with Buddhist values. Buddha advised against occupations that involve killing or causing harm to living beings, involve deceit, fraud, or exploitation, involve intoxicants or drugs. Key insights. Right livelihood supports spiritual progress. A job that is ethically sound creates less conflict and allows us to cultivate peace and concentration. Aligning work with values. By choosing a livelihood that helps others and respects life, we reduce harm and stay aligned with our moral principles. Right livelihood ensures that our work contributes positively to our own spiritual journey and the well-being of others. Right effort, sama vayama. Right effort is about cultivating a positive mental state and working to develop and maintain wholesome qualities while eliminating unwholesome ones. It involves preventing unwholesome states, making an effort to prevent negative thoughts, emotions, or behaviors from arising. Abandoning unwholesome states. If negative states do arise, we make an effort to abandon them quickly. Developing wholesome states. Actively cultivating positive states of mind, such as kindness, mindfulness, and wisdom. Maintaining wholesome states. Sustaining and nurturing these positive mental states once they have been developed. Key insights. Effort is essential for growth. Achieving enlightenment requires consistent effort to overcome obstacles and nurture beneficial qualities in the mind. Mental discipline. Right effort helps us break the cycle of unwholesome patterns and develop a more peaceful, compassionate, and wise mind. Right effort helps us grow spiritually, overcome mental defilements, and attain lasting peace. Right mindfulness, samasati. Right mindfulness involves being fully aware of the present moment, observing thoughts, feelings, and sensations without attachment or aversion. It is often developed through mindfulness meditation, sati, and includes mindfulness of the body, observing bodily sensations and actions. Mindfulness of feelings, noticing emotional states and responses. Mindfulness of the mind, being aware of thoughts and mental states. Mindfulness of mental objects, observing the content of consciousness, including desires, intentions, and perceptions. Key insights. Awareness of the present moment. Mindfulness allows us to live more fully in the present and reduces the tendency to become lost in the past or future. Non-reactivity. By practicing mindfulness, we learn to respond to situations skillfully, without being controlled by our impulses or emotions. Right mindfulness cultivates clarity and awareness, allowing us to observe our thoughts and actions objectively and reduce suffering caused by unawareness. Right concentration, sama samadhi. Right concentration refers to the cultivation of deep states of mental focus, often achieved through meditation. It involves developing a calm and unified mind, free from distractions. The Buddha taught 4 jhanas, meditative absorptions, which are progressively deeper states of concentration. The first jhana, characterized by joy and contentment, accompanied by deep mental focus. The second jhana, a state of inner peace and mental stillness. The third jhana, a state of equanimity and calm. The fourth jhana, a state of pure, unshakable equanimity and serenity. The 3 marks of existence. The 3 marks of existence are core concepts in Buddhism that explain the fundamental nature of reality. They offer profound insights into the nature of our existence and suffering, and understanding these marks is crucial for overcoming attachment and achieving enlightenment, Nirvana. Let's explore each of them in detail. The first is impermanence, anicca. The first mark of existence, impermanence, teaches that all things are in a constant state of change. Nothing in the universe is fixed, and everything, whether it is physical, mental, or emotional, is subject to change, decay, and dissolution. This includes our bodies, our thoughts, our relationships, and even our experiences of happiness or suffering. Impermanence can be observed in the following ways. Physical phenomena. The material world is in constant flux, from the cycles of nature to the aging of our bodies. Mental phenomena, thoughts, feelings, and perceptions arise and fade away. No mental state is permanent, and even our ideas of who we are subject to change. External events. Life circumstances, such as wealth, health, and relationships, are fleeting and ever-changing. Key insights. Suffering from attachment. We often cling to things that are impermanent, seeking to hold on to pleasures, people, or conditions that inevitably change. This attachment leads to dissatisfaction, as we cannot control the impermanence of things. Freedom from attachment. By recognizing the impermanent nature of everything, we learn not to cling to things, reducing our suffering and cultivating a more peaceful, flexible mind. Understanding anicca helps reduce attachment and fear of loss, making it easier to live with an open heart and an adaptable mind. It also allows us to appreciate life more fully, knowing that all moments are fleeting and precious. The suffering or dissatisfaction, dukkha. The second mark of existence, dukkha, acknowledges that suffering, dissatisfaction, or unease is an inherent part of the human condition. It refers to more than just physical pain. It encompasses all forms of dissatisfaction or unease we experience in life. Dukkha is the feeling of discontent or stress that arises from the impermanent and ever-changing nature of life. Dukkha manifests in several ways: physical pain, illness, injury, aging, and death; emotional pain, anxiety, sadness, fear, and disappointment; existential dissatisfaction, the inherent dissatisfaction that arises from the fact that things don't last, and no worldly achievement or material possession can bring lasting happiness. Buddha described several forms of dukkha. Dukkha, obvious suffering, such as physical pain or emotional distress. Viparinama dukkha, the suffering of change, when what we enjoy or love is lost, altered, or fades away. Sankhara dukkha, the subtle suffering of conditioned existence, which refers to the deep dissatisfaction that arises from the impermanence of life itself. Key insights. Suffering is universal. Everyone experiences suffering in some form, and this is a natural part of existence. Suffering is caused by attachment. Our attachment to impermanent things and our resistance to change leads to suffering. Learning to release attachment can lessen our suffering. By recognizing that suffering is an intrinsic part of life, we can begin to confront it head-on. This realization helps us develop compassion for ourselves and others and guides us to seek ways of reducing suffering, such as following the path of the Buddha. The third is non-self, anatta. The third mark of existence, non-self, teaches that there is no permanent, unchanging self or soul, Atman. The concept of self is an illusion created by the mind. We tend to think of ourselves as distinct, permanent entities with fixed identities, but this is not in line with reality. According to Buddhism, the sense of self is merely a collection of ever-changing physical and mental processes, and it has no independent, enduring existence. The doctrine of anatta is a direct challenge to the conventional view of a permanent self or soul. Instead, the Buddha taught that what we call the self is composed of the following 5 aggregates, skandhas. 1. Form, rupa, the physical body and material existence. 2. Feeling, vedana, sensory experiences or feelings of pleasure, pain, or neutrality. 3rd, perception, samjna, recognition of objects and experiences. 4th, mental formations, sankhara, thoughts, intentions, desires, and habitual reactions. 5. consciousness, vijnana, awareness or the stream of consciousness. Each of these aggregates is impermanent and subject to change, and there is no inherent, unchanging self that exists independently of these elements. Key insights. No permanent self. There is no fixed, unchanging identity or self that endures over time. We are a process, not a thing. Ego and attachment. The belief in a permanent self leads to attachment, pride, fear, and suffering. Letting go of this belief can free us from the cycle of suffering. Interconnectedness. If there is no separate, permanent self, it highlights the interconnectedness of all beings. We are not isolated, but part of a larger web of existence. The realization of anatta leads to the letting go of ego, attachment, and the false sense of self. This can reduce suffering, increase compassion, and foster a sense of unity with all beings. When we stop clinging to an illusory self, we are free to live more peacefully and harmoniously. By deeply understanding these three marks of existence, we can begin to detach from the illusions of permanence, selfhood, and control, which in turn leads to the cessation of suffering and the attainment of enlightenment. The awareness of impermanence, the reality of suffering, and the insight into non-self are key to walking the path toward wisdom, compassion, and liberation. Dependent origination, paticca samuppada. Dependent origination, paticca samuppada, is one of the most profound and fundamental teachings in Buddhism. It explains how all phenomena arise in dependence on causes and conditions, and it provides a deep understanding of the nature of reality and suffering. This doctrine also directly supports the teaching of anatta, non-self, by illustrating that everything is interdependent, and there is no permanent, independent self. What is dependent origination, paticca samuppada? In its simplest form, dependent origination means that everything arises because of specific causes and conditions, and nothing exists independently or permanently. In Buddhism, it is often summarized by the phrase, "This being, that becomes," from the arising of this, that arises. Everything that exists, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or even spiritual, comes into being through a complex web of causes and conditions. Nothing can exist or occur in isolation. In this sense, all phenomena are interconnected, and nothing is truly independent or self-sustaining. Nirvana. Nirvana is one of the central concepts in Buddhism, representing the ultimate goal of Buddhist practice. It is a state of liberation, freedom from suffering, dukkha, and the cessation of the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, samsara. Nirvana is often described as the realization of true peace, enlightenment, and the extinguishment of all desires, attachments, and ignorance that bind an individual to suffering. What is nirvana? The term nirvana comes from the Sanskrit root nir, meaning out or away, and vana, meaning blowing or fanning. In essence, nirvana can be understood as the extinguishing or blowing out of the flames of greed, hatred, and delusion, mental states that fuel suffering. It represents the cessation of these unwholesome mental states, which are the causes of suffering. Nirvana is not a place or a thing, but a state of being. It is often described as the cessation of suffering, the end of all mental and physical suffering caused by craving, attachment, and ignorance, the extinction of desire and ignorance. The root causes of suffering, the three poisons, greed, hatred, and delusion, are eradicated. Freedom from samsara. It is the state of freedom from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, samsara. where the individual no longer accumulates karma that leads to further cycles of rebirth. Ultimate peace and liberation. Nirvana is a state of perfect peace, bliss, and liberation. It transcends the worldly experience and the limitations of conditioned existence. As we've explored today, the 14 unanswered questions remind us of the profound depth of the Buddha's wisdom. Rather than dwelling on speculative inquiries, the Buddha directed us to focus on what truly matters, understanding the nature of suffering, its causes, and the path to liberation. These unanswered questions challenge us to let go of distractions and embrace the teachings that guide us toward clarity, peace, and enlightenment. They show us that some answers are not necessary for liberation, and that the real path lies in living mindfully and compassionately in the present moment. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. If you found value in these timeless teachings, please like, share, and subscribe for more explorations into the wisdom of the Buddha. Let us walk this path of self-realization and peace together.